Hi, today we're going to be talking about the feudal society and political structure of Central Europe. First, the relationship between the lord and the vassal. The relationship between the lords and the vassals made up a huge part of political and social structure of the feudal system. This is kind of the glue that held society together. Vassals had a certain duty to perform for the lords. They were expected to perform it, and the lord could count on most of the vassals. All nobles were ultimately vassals of the king. At the top of the social structure is the king, and anyone who was underneath the king was ultimately a vassal. So what was a knight? You see the knights in the movies, jousting and fighting. Almost all nobles were knights. Training would begin for a knight at age 7 as a page under the guidance of the lady of the manor. You would work for the lady of the manor, learn the protocol and the etiquette, and generally learn how to behave as a gentleman. By about your mid-teens, you became a squire, and you actually started your training under other accomplished knights. Those deemed worthy were dubbed knights. What's life like on a manor for an average person? There were two groups of peasant workers on the manor. There was a freeman, or the freemen, skilled workers who paid rent and could leave the manor whenever they wished, and they had a skill that was needed by others on the manor, whether they were a blacksmith, they worked with leather, or they had some job that was valued, or there was a serf. These were workers bound by the land, by contract with the nobles. They had no freedom. They were the nobles' property. You could think of them as almost an ancient version or a medieval version of a slave. The feudal contract. You have the lords on the top, the vassals on the bottom. The lords gave protection to the vassals. Other lords weren't going to attack them. Other nations weren't going to attack them. They had the protection of the lords. The vassals gave service to the lord in the form of farming, could be fighting for him, could be any of a number of things here. And that completes your circle of the feudal contract. Okay, constructing the pyramid of power. So at the very bottom of the medieval feudalism chart here, you have the serfs and the freemen. Slightly higher, you have the lesser nobles or the knights. Okay, they offered protection. They provided labor. On top of them, you have more powerful nobles. Okay? The lesser nobles and the knights would provide them with loyalty and military service if they needed it. They would protect them with land and protection. So they may have a large chunk of land, and they broke it up into pieces and gave it to the lesser nobles, who in turn would break that up smaller and let the serfs and the free men work on them. Above the powerful nobles, we have above the powerful nobles, we have the king. The king was provided with loyalty and service by the powerful nobles, and provided land for them to be broken up into pieces from the top. So ultimately you have a vassal here of the king, a vassal here of the powerful nobles, and vassals of the lesser nobles. So these three could all be considered vassals at separate points in times during their life or the spectrum of feudalism. The king ultimately owned all the land in his kingdom and decided to break it up into pieces as he saw fit. Okay. Let's see how much we remember. Look at these questions, take 2 or 3 minutes, see if you can answer them. Okay, here's your answers. Everyone owed loyalty to and that would be the king, because ultimately the king is at the top of this political spectrum. Nobles were really the most powerful. They got land from the king. Lesser nobles or knights gave military service in return for land. Serfs were bound to the land. They worked in return for protection. And freemen were skilled workers. They paid rent to the nobles and were free to move if they wanted to. Hopefully this gives you a brief idea of feudalism and feudalistic society in Central Europe during the Middle Ages. Thank you.